LCC has launched a exciting partnership with Cyben Solutions as of beginning of this year, and a new program in cybersecurity bootcamp, preparing experts in the cybersecurity, specialists in cybersecurity, will be launched in a week's time. So for anyone who finds this topic interesting, I will drop the link both in the comments on Zoom and on Facebook wall, so that anyone can learn more information about the Cybersecurity Bootcamp. But today, I'm very excited to present our partner, colleague from Cyben Solutions, Aviel, who will be leading us into an interesting webinar with the topic of data breaches in 2021. So Aviel, maybe you could then introduce more of yourself to our audience, and then of course the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for introducing and for inviting me today. And of course, good evening to our friends and everyone watching on Zoom and on Facebook. I've seen actually there are more people on Facebook than Zoom. I don't know if it's because it's easier or, takes less resources, but welcome everyone. My name is Aviel. I'm a program manager at Cyben Solutions. I worked in the past as an ethical hacker and a security expert for multiple companies, including worldwide companies, mostly in Europe and a lot in Israel as well. So it's a pleasure seeing you all. And today's topic will mostly be about data protection, data security, data privacy, and basically everything related to these topics, because first of all, I understand and I know that there is some sort of a hot topic these days in Lithuania regarding CDB, and we'll talk about that as well, don't worry. But first we'll go to the high level details, and then we're going to dive in specifically to this event. So I'm going to share my presentation about it. And before that, like a word or two about our bootcamp. So first of all, it's a cybersecurity bootcamp, which is directly related to cybersecurity defense, meaning that as a cybersecurity graduate, you will be able to join the cybersecurity industry with some kinds of roles, either as a cybersecurity expert, a cybersecurity analyst, or anything in between. From my experience, it's an amazing topic, and I'm not that biased, honestly. So I can really say that it's a super interesting topic. That's about it. A little bit about Cyben maybe before we start. So we're a global education company, cyber education company, of course. We partner with amazing partners such as LCC to provide cybersecurity training in a lot of aspects. This specifically is about the bootcamp that LCC are launching very soon. And today we're going to talk a bit about cybersecurity, about GDPR, and specifically about CDB. So again, welcome if anyone is joining right now. And let's start with something that I'm not sure if you know or if you've heard or not, but this is very interesting. But 95% of all cybersecurity breaches that are known at this point, that's a rough estimation, but that's kind of like an average number, are related directly to human errors, meaning that if we could somehow remove human errors from this equation, then only 5% of cybersecurity incidents as we know today would have actually happened. That's an insane number. And of course, this number is backed up by IBM, their intelligence department, meaning that it has something behind it. And it's very interesting to think that most of the stuff that we hear over the news, including CDB that we're going to talk about very soon, is actually related to human errors, meaning that our job as cybersecurity experts is not necessarily fixing stuff that are, related to, I don't know, random errors that came from nowhere, or finding relevant vulnerabilities or stuff like that. It is, of course, but a lot and a big effort is making sure that people don't do mistakes, either cybersecurity experts and either other departments that work together with the cybersecurity department, meaning that your job as a cybersecurity expert is mostly about mitigating and avoiding human errors. And of course, helping your partners, your friends, and your colleagues to avoid that. And before we dive into specific human errors that maybe you've seen in the past or not, let's try and talk a bit about who's responsible for the human errors, because we know that in the European Union until 2018, it was really hard to hold someone responsible for a data breach. Okay, one company has his data breached and posted online, and then they say it's not ours, and it's kind of hard to keep track of exactly which data came from who and where and why, and you need a lot of forensic experts and cybersecurity experts to make sure that you can validate where data came from. And there's a lot of confusion, and honestly I think that a lot of companies enjoyed this kind of confusion because they were not held accountable and were not held responsible for these human errors. Not just human errors, but that's the biggest amount of errors. But then in 2018, actually in 2016, the decision was made, but in 2018, there was an execution and implementation, and of course, enforcement of the GDPR. Okay, and I'm sure that some of you have heard about GDPR, and some of you may not. So let's talk about it a bit. So GDPR is the acronyms for General Data Protection Regulation. Okay. It was formed and enforced by the European Union, and it's not a rule, and it's not like a specific rule that says you need to protect data. Okay, it's a set of rules that we're going to discuss more in a few minutes, but it's a set of rules that are directly connected to each other, and they're all about how to gather private data of users like you and me, of course, how to manage it, and how to protect it. Because let's take, for example, a shopping website. So a shopping website has a lot of data that it gathers, right? It has your username, it has your password, maybe it has your email, it has your home address, it has your phone number, it has your work number sometimes, it has your work address if you send something to work. Has a lot of details about you, maybe even financial details, some sort of manipulation of your credit card or your bank number, your bank account, maybe your ID or SSN, depending on where you live. And of course, this website manages the data, right? It keeps it, and it does stuff with that, like, can I keep someone's credit card or not? Is it impossible? Can I keep someone's password or not? I don't know. And of course, how do I protect the data that I keep, right? So let's say I have permission to keep someone's password. How do I keep it protected while I consume it, on a daily basis? Because you log in almost every day to a lot of websites. And the most important thing here is that it doesn't just apply to European companies or European clients. It applies to everyone, every company and every person that operates in the European Union, meaning that if there's an American company that has European clients in Europe, that means that it applies to them as well. It's super important to make sure that we understand that even if a specific country, let's say Switzerland, which is not part of the Union, everything in the GDPR still applies to, to Swiss companies, for example, because they are operating in the European Union if they have any European clients. So that's super important. And a little thing that I want to connect the GDPR to is the talent shortage, because we understand that GDPR takes a lot of effort, because we're going to talk about it soon, but it makes companies work harder to protect and to save your data, which is great. But again, it costs a lot, meaning that you need more resources and better and more cybersecurity experts. And as you can see here, I've gathered like a very, very short and small amount of headlines from the news and from interesting websites that you can see that cybersecurity companies and companies that are not cybersecurity companies, but they need to protect their data somehow, face a huge shortage of not just amount of people, but also quality of people, meaning that there is a talent shortage in terms of like not enough people. There's a huge demand and not too much people to offer themselves, but there is also a very, very small amount of quality people, meaning that a lot of companies are missing cybersecurity experts that actually know what is information security. They know the basics, they know everything, they know the logical thinking, they know the business needs, they know everything. And these are the people that the companies are looking for today. And this is what we aim to provide you in the bootcamp, a set of skills and knowledge to actually engage in cybersecurity expertise, be a cybersecurity expert, not just another cybersecurity expert, but the cybersecurity expert. This is what we aim to take you for. It's super important, and this is something that is always on our minds, how to make sure that we're not aligned with the industry, we're ahead of the industry. That's super important. Back to GDPR. So some interesting things about GDPR. Just a second. Sorry. So some interesting things about GDPR. These are my favorite parts, but you can take a look later at the European Union's website and regulation, and you can there are some places in the news that you can read about the basics and the essentials of GDPR. But these parts are actually my favorite because I really believe that they're like the core of data protection. So the first one is about data processing. So the GDPR actually says that if you need to process someone's data, for example, use it, you need to use only what's necessary, meaning that if you don't need to, I don't know, save someone's first and last name, because you can do first name and ID. So you don't need a first, last name, and an ID. So you can, remove what's not necessary. If you can identify someone only by his ID, that means that save only the ID. Don't save everything that you need if you don't really need it. That's super important. The second thing is about the storage. So let's say that there is a shopping company that you haven't visited in, I don't know, 4 years. So if you haven't visited their website for 4 years, this is, an appropriate amount of time that they should already remove your data from their website. This means that GDPR actually tells companies, okay, you need to take the time that you save someone's data or someone's private data and reduce it to the minimum time of storage as possible. Okay, this is super important. Another thing is, of course, about data protection from unauthorized access. This means that everyone who has someone else's data, let's say, again, our favorite shopping website, so they need to make sure that no one that is not authorized can access the data. Okay, this is, again, it's kind of understandable, but still this is something worth mentioning. Data protection officer, this is very interesting because this is a new role that got born in GDPR. So GDPR says that each company that holds a certain amount of data needs someone who's a data protection officer. It can either be someone that is like doing this as a side job, but it can also be someone dedicated if the company is big enough. So data protection officer is someone who works directly with the regulator, but also directly with the cybersecurity experts, meaning that he's the coordinator between the regulation and the law, and also with the cybersecurity department. he needs to make sure that everything that the cybersecurity department does is according to what the GDPR and the other regulations are doing. This is a job that if you would go 10 years back to 2011, you would probably not hear about this role, data protection officer. Maybe in very specific companies that are very, very resourceful, maybe you'd hear about someone who does that. But today it's a role that is much more relevant. Another interesting thing that maybe you don't know about, but it applies directly to you. So every person have the right to receive a copy of his data and ask to erase it. Meaning that if there is a website that somehow keeps your data and you don't like it, you don't want it. So you can actually ask the company or the operator of the website for a copy of everything that they own about you. And you can ask them to erase it, and they legally have to do that. If not, they're not compliant with GDPR, and you can actually sue them. Might take some time, but these things are possible. And another very interesting thing. So let's say that the company was breached. Okay, let's say CDB, for example. From the second they hear about the breach and they understand that they were breached, they have 72 hours to report it. Okay, either a data breach that they know that data was breached, or either a cyber attack that they're not sure what exactly what happened. But this is super important because companies used to hide that they were breached because they were afraid of regulation, they were afraid of their bad reputation, and of course, some of the cybersecurity people were afraid for their job. And I kind of understand that, but this is not the industry standard. I mean, as cybersecurity experts, we're not here to hide anything. The opposite, we're here to help people be transparent and be as the best experts that we can be. This is about it. These are my favorite parts about GDPR. You can, of course, talk about it. And another thing that I want to discuss about is the enforcement of GDPR, because you're probably looking at this right now saying, okay, great, GDPR is some sort of regulation, but who can actually enforce it? Who is going to start suing companies for data breaches? So as you can see, it's going to happen, and it happens. There is a website called Enforcement Tracker. You can actually scan this QR code, and it will redirect you to this Enforcement Tracker. Maybe we can actually go to it right now and see what's happening right there. I think it's a good practice. So Enforcement Tracker. This is actually, you can see here some news and some interesting things. So let's see, for example, in Lithuania. So you can see here the company name, right? And their ID. You can see the date. You can see the amount of euros that they were fined. And you can see the specific type of violation that they did. For example, non-compliance with general data and processing. You remember that we said that you need to process only what's relevant. So they didn't. For example, the Vilnius City Municipality Administration, for example, they didn't comply with the GDPR and they got fined for 15,000 euros. That's not a lot, honestly, but let's go to other places and see if we can get some interesting fines. Besides that, removal filters. Let's see what's the highest fine that someone has received. So you can see that Google, for example, were fined for 50 million euros in France. And you can see that H&M, the Swedish company, were fined in Germany. You can see that there's a telecommunications company in Italy. And I really urge you to go to these websites and take a look, because it's super interesting just, to make sure that you understand what happens, you understand the news, and always be, understanding of what happens in the environment, because you are the future cybersecurity experts. And I really, really think that this is something you should, take in consideration. Okay. And sorry, just a second. So actually, why GDPR? Why do you need the GDPR? We understand that there is a need to protect people's data, but let's say, what type of data? Why is it relevant? What will anyone do with this data? Like, what would anyone do with my, I don't know, address or ID or bank account? So, you need some sort of an implication in order to justify this GDPR regulation. So I'm going to go to the dark side, kind of like move to the other side of the screen, and kind of talk about the hacker side. So as I said before, I was an ethical hacker a few years. I worked for a lot of companies doing a lot of research and work in terms of hacking companies, mostly through human errors. So it's important to say that hackers, they do a lot of research, but if it's possible, hackers will usually try to manipulate humans and not software, because humans are much more easier to manipulate. That's the fact. Second. So, if you can hack someone's mind in 10 minutes and ask them to open a malware, instead of needing to start analyzing the software and how to inject malware inside it, like, it takes a lot of time. So humans are kind of like the easiest target for hackers most of the time. So these are the stuff that hackers are usually looking for, and this is very interesting to understand. So let's go from the bad, which is, of course, a representation of home addresses, full names, location histories, and future locations. So of course, this is not the only data that you can find about someone, but this is like the highlights. And these things are bad because, like, they're not super terrible, because you cannot use these left side, you cannot use it directly to hack someone, right? You can't hack someone with his full name or location history or home address, but you can leverage this for other things. So it's not good that someone has it. For example, someone's location history, right? You have access to his GPS or his Google Maps history. So you can actually know that he was in a coffee shop called, I don't know, Lithuania Coffee 12 minutes ago. And then you can actually call him and tell him, hi, I'm from the coffee shop. Your visa had a problem. Can you, give me your visa number again? Because we have some issues here with the connections, or something similar. Maybe ask for his email address. You can do stuff like that. So it's not directly connected to hacking someone, but it is a good way to leverage other tactics. So these stuff on the left side are stuff that hackers would love to find, but they're not the best type of data. The second and almost the best type of data is stuff that are called the worst, from my perspective. And these are stuff that are connected to reaching out to people, meaning that these are, again, not things that I can directly hack someone with, but they're direct connections to someone, meaning that I can actually talk to someone according to these types of things. For example, phone number is super important, right? I can spoof a phone number. I can, be an imposter and fraud. Email address, again, I can contact someone via email and maybe try some sort of a phishing scam on him. Bank account details, I can call someone, say I'm from the bank, I already know your bank account, so it's easier for me to say that I'm from the bank because I already know your number, so it looks more interesting. And of course the obvious, which are stuff that are kind of obvious, but still, these are the worst type of data that can be exposed. These are credentials, username, password, credit card details, confidential business information. These are stuff that you really don't want exposed, right? So these are stuff that, when exposed, they directly lead to bad stuff, okay? So this is what hackers are looking for, right? When you start launching an attack on someone or organization, these is the types of data that you would want to find. And a bit about CDB. This is a very interesting topic. So first of all, it's important to say that the amount of people that were affected by this data breach is honestly crazy. I have never, maybe I've seen a lot of data breaches in the past, but this is something which is like super important to say. Almost 4% of Lithuania's population were affected. And if we leave the population that doesn't have, emails like kids and, stuff like that, so that's even more, I'd say about 6 to 8% of the population. Any of you have an account in CDB or had an account in the last 2 or 3 years? You can write in the chat, in the Q&A. Actually, I can't see the Facebook, but let's assume you can. So first of all, I want to tell you what was exposed. So if you think you're a part of it and you were a customer along 2018, you should probably make sure that your data is, if it's exposed, so try to make sure how to handle it. If it's your password, so change your password. If it's your phone number, then make sure that you block spam and stuff like that, and be aware of fraud. And again, emails. What happened there? So actually, we're in 2021, but the data breach itself, the day that the hacker actually got the data, was approximately 3 years ago in 2018, meaning that the hacker was holding these databases for over 3 years on his personal computer or server. And this was, again, directly related to a human error. Okay, I'm going to tell you a bit about the flow. So there is a hacker that kind of wants to see what he can find about CDB, okay? Because he maybe wants to check their security posture, maybe just wants to have fun. A lot of hackers work for fun and reputation, not necessarily, for money or anything like that. So CDB, the internet works in a way that it has domain names, meaning that it's like some sort of a phone book of the entire names of servers and locations that are connected to CDB. Like there's the website cdb.com, and there's like www.cdb.com. That is like a subdomain of CDB, right? So you can actually look for a lot of websites connected to CDB. Maybe we can do it ourselves right now. I'll show you how it looks. So there is something called the DNS. It's some sort of a service that actually allows you to change different things. So let's go to ctb.lt, right? ctb.lt. And let's see how it looks from the other side. So you can see here that these are the records connected to CTB, right? So there is ctb.lt. And this is, of course, the IP address. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term IP address, but this is like the logical address of the website. Like this is the name of the website, and this is the logical address of the website. I'm not going to get into technical details. And as you can see here, this is like the phone book of CTB, meaning all the websites and other servers that are connected to CTB. And as you can see, there's a website called mycar.ctb.lt. You can visit it later. I don't think it's relevant at this point, but you can also download it and you can see a map of how it looks like. As you can see here, this is CTB, and this is like a map of the entire organization and entire website. Okay, so this is about it. So as you've seen here, it took me like 3 seconds to search for CDB's domains. And this is what the hacker did. You look for domains, and all of a sudden you've seen a domain that looks a bit suspicious, a bit weird. And when he entered this domain, he could actually see that this is something called an Azure blob. So I'm not going to get into technical details, but this is a kind of cloud-based service that you can host data on. Okay, this is like, I wouldn't say it's a database, it's more of a file storage place on the cloud, hosted by Microsoft. And when you implement this Azure blob and put data on it, by default, it allows everyone to access this data, meaning that someone, one of the people that managed to host all of CTB's files and their users' data, hosted everything on this Azure blob, right? But they forgot for some reason, maybe didn't think it's interesting enough, maybe didn't know he needs to, but he did a mistake and he did not secure this blob, meaning that anyone could access it. So it took the hacker about 4 minutes to see that he can access everything. It looks like a bunch of folders that you can browse into. And then he just downloaded everything. It was that simple. He didn't need to hack anything. He didn't need to make weird social engineering attacks or send malware to anyone. No, this is much, much more simple than you think. Just looked into this DNS website that I showed you that took like 2 minutes. And then it just saw that there is a website that is accessible to everyone and is exposed to everyone and just serves you the data free without any constraints. This is 100% a human error. And these are stuff that we as cybersecurity experts must stop, meaning that we do not know who this, okay? And I'm sure that, if he still works there, he will probably, make an amendment. I hope so. But it's super important to understand that these things are stuff that could have been prevented if there was a good GDPR enforcement at the time. I'm pretty sure that GDPR kind of like didn't even start at this time. So it wasn't really sure about what's going on with GDPR. But cybersecurity experts should have gone through this website before it was live, and they should have seen this coming. Okay, this is a human error that could have been easily mitigated. This is about it. I really hope that, first of all, you enjoyed, and I would really love to hear some from you. If you have any questions, if you have anything to ask about the bootcamp, about the presentation, just stuff that you want to ask me, feel free, please. I would love to talk. There is a Q&A section below. There is a chat, and there is a Facebook chat as well. I can't see it, but
I am monitoring that. So yes, this is just a reminder for everyone on Zoom as well as on the Facebook Live. If you do have questions, please feel free to ask them. Thank you, Aviel, for these insights. I mean, there are comments on the Facebook wall, on the Facebook chat, thanking you for the inside view to GDPR. So that was a very interesting and I guess a presentation and understanding kind of what that is about and why it's important. And then I think the CTB part, I think is of course very relevant for those who are from Lithuania and who have been watching the news media about this incident. It truly kind of is scary to hear from you, that it's 100% human error that could have been avoided. As we're waiting for the questions from our audience, I wanted to kind of get back to the term that you used describing yourself, the ethical hacker. Usually the hacker at once carries the negative connotations, right? And here we have the ethical hacker concept. So can you maybe link the ethical hacker concept to the bootcamp participants? I mean, in general, like the bootcamp, right, is there to help people get the entry into the cybersecurity world and become the specialists. So does it mean that the bootcamp participants could also be going into the ethical hacker roles in the future?
So, two things about ethical hacking. First of all, I'll tell you a bit about the role and then like how to get into this area. So first of all, about the role, ethical hacking is actually the practice of hacking systems, web applications, networks, and organizations to find flaws and then help the organization fix it. Meaning it's also called white hat hacking. This is actually helping organizations get better. It requires a lot of knowledge in different areas. For example, it requires knowledge in network security, in application security, in network infrastructure, in a lot of areas. This is why usually ethical hacking is not a junior or an entry-level role. It's kind of a mid-level role, meaning that from the first job that you will land, you can jump to being an ethical hacker as a secondary job. Of course, if you try hard enough and you learn hard enough, you can become an ethical hacker as a junior level position, but it's not something that I would have, I would suggest, because I really think that building a career path means that you need to build it from the foundations. And you first need to understand how things work, how things operate, how a corporate looks like in the cybersecurity aspect, and they'll build on top of it. Myself, for example, I've worked in IT for 5 years, then I worked for consulting cybersecurity for about 3 years, and only then, after 8 years, I managed to land the job as an ethical hacker. Once I learned hard enough, but again, there is a module in the bootcamp about ethical hacking, and you will engage in some ethical hacking methods and techniques. Because actually I wrote this course, so it's super fun. So it's very important to understand how hackers think. Even if you don't do practical ethical hacking each day in your work as a cybersecurity specialist, you still need to understand how hackers operate and what's their mindset and what are the tools and the practices that they use. So there is an entire module dedicated to practicing ethical hacking. It's super fun, and I really hope that once you get there, you can go there. I see a question here.
Right.
Right, I will answer it. What are the main tools for data leakage prevention? So that's a great question. I think that we can actually take this into two parts. First of all is preventing access to the data, meaning that you need efficient access controls. This is the term that you use, access controls, that don't allow anyone to access the data at all. So, once someone already accessed the data, it's a bit hard to prevent them from taking it back to wherever he wants. So first, you need to prevent someone from accessing data. The main tools for that are, really depending on what exactly you're looking for. So for example, if you have a database, you would probably first protect it with an efficient username and password that applies with a lot of policies. You would encrypt the communication between the database and some other components. You would probably follow the best practices of the vendor and the cybersecurity industry. And of course, you would make sure that it's not accessible to anyone that is not directly connected to you or anyone you need. So it's called authorization, making sure that only anyone which is authorized can access it. This is about preventing access. About preventing the leakage itself when someone has already accessed. So there are tools called DLP, data leakage prevention, or data loss prevention. They're both applicable. And these are tools that actually monitor traffic outside. And they're usually used to see if data is taking outside from the organization to external, whatever. It really depends exactly where. You can install DLP on your email account, for example, and then you can see if someone tries to send an email outside. You can install it on your personal computer, and you can see if someone tries to insert a USB device, for example, and prevent it. It really depends on exactly what type of leakage we're talking about, but DLP is the main tool and term used to prevent that. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Just again, a reminder that for any questions, feel free to type them in the comment section on our Facebook Live and in our chat box um, on Zoom. So it's great to hear that the ethical hacking course was written by you as part of the bootcamp program. So because we announced that this webinar is also, it is basically presented by the Cybersecurity Bootcamp, which LCC International University is doing together with Cybint. And the first partnership product, the first bootcamp is to begin within a week on March 15th. And for those of you who are interested in cybersecurity, you should be aware that these boot camps can be done part-time or full-time. So our first program will be done part-time. But Aviel, I'm just thinking maybe a few words from you about this cybersecurity boot camp. Who would it be best for, and why would you advise someone to go through this program if they are interested in a career in cybersecurity?
Sure. So first of all, the persona that is fit for the bootcamp is basically anyone with high motivation, anyone that thinks that he can learn and understand things that are, not necessarily, taught by an instructor, meaning that in cybersecurity, you need to do the research on your own a lot of times. Even in the bootcamp, you have a lot of assignments that allow you to and require you to learn on your own, of course, with our support, but you still need to make sure that you know how to handle it, because in 3 months from now, you finish the bootcamp, you go to your first job, and you still need to learn and constantly evolve. So people with motivation and the urge to research and learn, these are the type of people that we want. And honestly, I need to say that age or previous profession or previous knowledge is not required. You need to learn, you need to understand English, because most of the content about cybersecurity is in English today. This is like the international baseline. So it's important to understand English in a good manner. Besides that, motivation is probably the most relevant part from my perspective. What was the second part? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Well, I mean, it's who it is for and why would it be a good program to consider?
Oh, great. So I think that the main thing about this program, which is different from other programs, is that the program allows the students to learn skills. So let's take, for example, one of the defense systems, a firewall, okay? So there is a defense system called a firewall, right? So a lot of boot camps that I've seen and in the past, they actually teach you how to use a specific firewall, okay? Which is great. But then when you arrive to an interview and someone asks you about another firewall, you kind of, feel uncertain about maybe this firewall is different. I don't know, I'm not sure. We don't aim to teach you about how to use a specific firewall. We teach you about the concept. We teach you about how to understand the high-level design of a firewall. And we teach you how to handle and how to observe all the firewalls, meaning that we don't teach you specific skills. We provide you with the skill set to actually understand things on your own. This is something that is kind of different from other programs. Of course, that we use some tools, but we don't teach you how to use tools. We teach you how to learn new stuff on your own. We teach you how to, we teach concepts. This is the main thing about that. This is very important because honestly, I think that a cybersecurity career is something that it has so many variants and so many career paths that you can take. So for example, we have a bootcamp alumni that finished a few months ago, and he's actually, working in a law office helping the forensic investigations. So, that doesn't really sound like cybersecurity, but, even law enforcement need help with forensic investigations, because there are a lot of computer criminals and they need help with that. And we have another alumni that works in a nuclear factory, helps protecting their assets. This kind of sounds weird. Why would a nuclear place need something like that? But these are stuff that you don't think about, because you always think about, great, tech companies need cybersecurity experts. So it was that like that maybe 30 years ago. Today, everyone needs cybersecurity experts. So I really think that there is a lot of need and a lot of demand from the industry for more experts.
Thank you. Well, we have a question on our Facebook wall. Does a cybersecurity expert require technical skills? And if so, which ones? What about programming?
So first of all, it's important to say that for the junior and the entry-level roles, you do not need programming as a baseline to understand cybersecurity. I would say that programming can help understand the logic and a lot of low-level things behind, okay? So it's a really good practice and it would help, but most of our bootcamp alumni were not programmers and are not programmers today. They do not know any types of high-level programming. It does require, like cybersecurity bootcamp, specifically ours, require a very basic level of programming, mostly scripts, not like big software. And these are stuff that we teach you on the bootcamp, meaning that you don't need any prior knowledge about it. We will teach you everything you need to know. It's mostly about scripting and about understanding JavaScript, which is a client-side code. If you want more data, feel free to ask. And about specific programming languages, Python is also great if you know it, but again, it's not necessary. You can pass the bootcamp without starting it with any programming knowledge. But again, understanding the fundamentals is always great.
Right.
I think there is a question for you now.
Right. Well, thank you, Aurelia, for the question. The question is, well, can we comment more on the part-time aspect of the bootcamp program? How will it be organized? Well, we keep talking about the LCC Cybersecurity Bootcamp done in partnership with Cybent, and there are two versions of the program, as I mentioned, full-time and the part-time. So obviously, the part-time program is more targeted at those who need to juggle, studies and work, and then they could be doing this bootcamp at the same time. So the part-time program will run for 6 months. There is a lot of flexibility in terms of when you will be doing the studying on your own. On average, we are saying that it will be around 20 hours a week, but there will be two times per week where you would have assigned meeting times with the facilitator of the program. So there will be meetings twice a week when the entire group meets with the facilitator, gets assigned tasks, it kind of covers material. And then for the rest of the assignments, I mean, as Aviel mentioned, there is a lot of independent working on the platform. So that's the way the part-time program is assigned. So Aviel, maybe you want to also kind of share your own insights, since you've worked with the program and you have previous participant experience as well.
Yeah, so I think that the part-time program, of course, is more suitable for people that have jobs or maybe have other responsibilities. But I really think that the part-time program, because it's more flexible and more, less condensed, meaning that you have more free time, mostly, on the evenings that you don't have the bootcamp, to actually study on your own. So there are pros and cons. For example, there is a big upside because you have some free days that you can actually learn on your own and kind of learn about new stuff and get ready for the next session or the next training day. The downsides, of course, is that maybe if you don't have time, you might forget a bit about what happened 2 or 3 days ago. Of course, the instructor is there to help and manage everything and make sure that you understand everything. It's also important to say that the platform of the bootcamp is always open. So you don't need to wait for the class to actually go through something that you were taught yesterday. If you need a refresh, you can just go in and do it again. So that's always great.
Thank you. Well, our time is coming to an end. So this is just a brief reminder that if anyone got inspired to dive into cybersecurity field at once, and if you're interested in the bootcamp, I did share the link in the comment section. These are the final days for registering for the bootcamp, which begins on March 15th. That's the part-time program. But you can also be following up LCC International University website for the dates for future programs, whether full-time version or the part-time version.